scores that were 20 points below the national average.
JavaScript data
Why?
object, we're
Because they
gonna
were
do
a
web
point or two
the
higher than the year
JavaScript
before.
object to go to
Maybe
your
it's important to look
code
for the good and be
and it is a
optimistic, he
25
says,
and
but
just
delusion
go
is
to
not the answer.
just and
Those who
here
celebrate failure will not be around to help today's
go to
students
through
celebrate their jobs flipping burgers. Someone has to tell children if they are behind and lay out a plan of attack to help them catch up.
it is a 24
All of his fifth graders master a reading list that includes Of Mice and Men,
videos
Native
here.
Son,
You can
Bury
see
My
that
Heart at
one
Wounded Knee,
chapter
The Joy Luck Club, The Diary of Anne
and
Frank,
go to just
To Kill a
your
Mockingbird,
JavaScript data
and A
object.
Separate Piece.
JavaScript data
Every one of
object
his sixth graders passes an
has
algebra
work with
final
us there.
that would reduce
Just
most
start
eighth and ninth
it
graders to tears. But again, all is achieved in an atmosphere of affection and deep
083
personal
Indian
commitment to
standard.
every
If I
student.
say that and go to this
Challenge and Nurture
third, I'm
describes
writing it
Delay's
is a
approach
function.
too.
It is a
One
given
of her
a
former
long
students
string give
expresses it
me
this way.
and just
That is part
go
of Miss
to
Delay's genius,
it
to put
and
people in the frame of mind where they can do their best. Very few teachers can actually get you to your ultimate potential. Miss Delay has that gift. She challenges you at the same time that you feel you are being nurtured.
Click on the web browser JavaScript.
Hard work and more hard
It is
work.
all method.
But are challenge and love enough?
It is all method
Not
you
quite.
want.
All great teachers teach students how to reach the high standards.
What do you want to
Collins
make
and
this?
Esquith didn't hand their
Just
students a reading
copy
list
this
and wish them
and
bon
just
voyage.
go to just
Collins's
and
students
here is
read and
script
discussed every line
and
of Macbeth
script
in
has
class.
just and see
Esquith
that
spent hours planning what
this
chapters they would read in class.
and
I know which child will handle the challenge of the most difficult paragraphs and carefully plan a passage for the shy youngster, who will begin his journey as a good reader. Nothing is left to chance. It takes enormous energy. But to be in a room with young minds who hang on every word of a classic book and beg for more if I stop makes all the planning worthwhile. What are they teaching the students en route? To love learning, to eventually learn and think for themselves, and to work hard on the fundamentals. Esquith's class often met before school,
by default,
after school,
JavaScript is
and on school
the
vacations to
shown
master the
display
fundamentals of English and
text
math,
string like this.
especially as the work got
And
harder.
here is not a
His motto,
giving
there
not
are no
a
shortcuts.
string.
Collins
And
echoes
here
that idea as
it
she tells her
just-
class, there is no magic here. Mrs. Collins is no
just-
miracle worker. I do not walk on water, I do not part the sea. I just love children and work harder than a lot of people, and so will you.
By default, JavaScript
Delay
will
expected a
browser
lot from her
types.
students,
It's
but she
shown
too
on
guided them
display
there.
data as a
Most
syntax
students are
string.
intimidated by the
You
idea
will
of
learn
talent,
much more
and it
about
keeps them in
how
a
to
fixed
display
mindset.
date later
But
in
Delay
this tutorial.
demystified talent.
Creating data object.
One student was
Date
sure he
object
couldn't
are
play a piece
created
as
with
fast
the
as
date
Itzhak Perlman,
constructor.
so she didn't let him see the metronome until he had achieved it. I know so surely that if he had been handling that metronome, as he approached that number, he would have said to himself, I can never do this as fast as Itzhak Perlman, and he would have stopped himself. Another student was intimidated by the beautiful sound made by talented violinists. We were working on my sound, and there was this one note I played, and Miss Delay stopped me and said, now that is a beautiful sound. She then explained how every note has to have a beautiful beginning, middle, and end, leading into the next note. And he thought, wow, if I can do it there, I can do it everywhere. Suddenly, the beautiful sound of Perlman made sense, and was not just an overwhelming concept. When students don't know how to do something and others do, the gap seems unbridgeable. Some educators try to reassure their students that they're just fine as they are. Growth-minded teachers tell students the truth and then give them the tools to close the gap. As Marva Collins said to a boy who was clowning around in class, you are in 6th grade and your reading score is 1.1. I don't hide your scores in a folder. I tell them to you so you know what you have to do. Now your clowning days are over. Then they got down to work. Students who
display data string can display data. JavaScript will by default output a date using toString method. The object toString represent of the date including the time shown and a format like the sequence specification. That is sequence specification By default, output is using the twisting method button. And when you display date object, HTML is automatically converted to a string with a toString like that. To date string. I want to see that to date string. I have in this object here, and I say that to date string. I say that it is the only date. So that March Saturday, March 01, 2025. At 2 UTF string. What is a UTF string? UTC. UTF means UTC. D dot to UTC. UTC string. It is the and the suffix on the GMT and the other time. At 2 ISO international converted data string ISO standard. If I say that D dot ISO string is gathering ISO to string, and now complete JavaScript data reference here, and now it will be exercise the time. Gonna do chest exercise. What is a strength in my chest learning? What was created with a flowing code, just like that. What code is a new date. New date. It is said that if I say that new thing here and go to just just here, and I say that paste date is already I will come into the now is a day, it is a 1 day 18 2024 Monday, it is in November 18 is 2024 9 18. Because month started 0 is the first month and 11 is the second month. Here are the ask the next question. Next question, create a date object and alert current date and time. Open date लिखा and then click on that. What date is created with the following code? It is a 24 and 10. It is a year. It is a month. It is a 18. It is a November 18, 2000. सबसे पहले ईयर आएगा, फिर मंथ आएगा, फिर डे आएगा. डे तो 1 से स्टार्ट होता है ना, तो फिर यहाँ पर ऐसा क्यों बता रहा है? If I go to just here and I say that and day, it is in November 18, 1924. It is in 1924. Got it. Thank you. It is a completed exercise. Changing given plus 24 hours, 0 24 hours, 3 plus 25.01 second, and it is 1,000 second date. Previously century, and two-digit year we will be interpreted as a 19x. It is a 19x, okay, then interpret. Now go to date format. Here is the JavaScript date format. JavaScript date format like that. There are three types of JavaScript date input format. ISO date, short date, it is a short date, long date is a long date. And the ISO format is a strict standard in JavaScript. The other format well defined and might be browser specific. JavaScript data output. Independently input or format, JavaScript will be by default output of date in for text string format like that. JavaScript ISO standard. If I say that international represent time ISO 86016 tax YYMMTD is also preferred JavaScript date format like that. It is YYMMDD. The computed date will be related to your time zone. Depending on your time zone, the recent above will vary March 24 and March 25. ISO date year and month is is that can be written without a specific YYMM and within that it is a here. Now there will be time there will the result of your and draw between the 28 and March 01 and when 01 just like that ISO date can be written without month and day 2000 by just like that. Time zone will be very vary between December 13, 2021 and January 01 2025. ISO date time like that. This is ISO time date and date capitalized date. UTC define the capitalized letter Z. If you want to modify the UTC as in that UTC universal the time coordinate same GMT Greenwich Mean Time. Omitting TGN date time string and give different design in a different browser time zone. Finally, setting the date without a specific and time zone. JavaScript will be used browser time zone. When getting a date without specifying the time zone, the result is converted to the browser time zone. In the other word, if a date time is equal to GMT Greenwich Mean Time, date time will be converted to CDT. Central UC Daylight Time. If a user browser from Central US, JavaScript dates, a short date are written with an ATMMDD syntax like this. Warning. In some browser month or day, no leading zeros, no leading zero may produce an error. We produce this error. If I go to this, it is given me error. When I see that it is a result error, it is a not able to understand the browser will be understand this. IYMM design defined some browser will try to was format not a number. IYMM I got it just see that it the behavior of DDMM Wi-Fi is also defined. Some browser will try to guess the format, some will return not a number. JavaScript long date. Long date are the most open MMTD Wi-Fi syntax like this. And month and day can be any error. Example and month can be written in full JavaScript or abbreviate a chain just like that. In Jan 2025, you can pause if I part the break. In the past, one of the parts that did, and I say that I see MCEC, and the past millisecond, it is a given millisecond. Usually, it is a new 24 around the flank. It is January. I said something in which time it is not. You can see that here universal it is the same as a GMT. Yes, it is a GMT. Coordinate following the code like that into parts is the March. It is going to mind the second the 13 March 11 2000 January. Between the 2000 and January did not that it is I did get format. It is a great format. It is a great area from the great day. It is a very important method. The new JavaScript data concept with the JavaScript just like that. If I say that and I say the cons obtain is content new day. It is a new day. I go to the stack instead of one after 1000 and here is a date. I say call the term here is a div and I call that div list 15 and I created own function here. Demo into let demo is equal to document development by ID and just manage this ID here we pass a demo and I will restore I'm going to chart to create a function time time now function and here time to HTML is into this and now we will just demo.html into plus code. Okay, and time long. We can decrease. You can say 15. Say that 15. Yes, true. Here, dollars 18, 83, minute, second. You can see that all the changing here. It will not change the date. Why change the date? If I go to chart now, just change. You can see that I created our own time. Carefully here, you want to know. It is a year, it is a month, it is a date, it is a hour, it is a minute, it is a second, it is a minute, it is a get time.
आजा बस रेणु दा चुपचाप आजा बस आया ये हाल लग रही बस ये बस यहाँ को रेणु दा आजा बस ये कुछ ना लाया नहीं आजा
I got a millisecond.
ना वो पूरी तो नहीं आजा जो तू खाना वो लिया
It is a millisecond.
ये मेरे नाम का पिज्जा लगी मेरी वहाँ रख कर दी हूँ टवल्ला मेरी टवल्ला
Here. Because it's not here, I will leave it permanently change here. It is this thing.
आली आज आली जल्दी पकवाले अल्लाह पाक संगिराना
Get minute, get second, get millisecond, get time. You just now I see that it is not get time, it is a get a second. I see that. And total here we will be date. I miss something date.
ना तो ले आ जाना कहीं जिंदगी
Is it get millisecond and it is a letter. And now to divide. You can change here. You can see that I'm changing. It is a 10 minute and it is a 10-minute long.
Refused to work, ripped up his homework assignments.
And now
A folder. I tell them to you so you know what you have to do. Now your clowning days are over. Then they got down to work. Students who don't care.
Villagers.
What about the students who won't work, who don't care to learn? Eventually, Gary became an eager participant and an avid writer. Later that year, the class was discussing Macbeth and how his misguided thinking led him to commit murder. It's sort of like Socrates says, isn't it, Miss Collins? Gary piped up. Macbeth should have known that straight thinking leads to straight living. For a class assignment, he wrote, Somnus, God of sleep, please awaken us. While we sleep, ignorance takes over the world. Take your spell off us. We don't have long before ignorance makes a coup d'etat of the world. When teachers are judging them, students will sabotage the teacher by not trying. But when students understand that school is for them, a way for them to grow their minds, they do not insist on sabotaging themselves. In my work, I have seen tough guys shed tears when they realize they can become smarter. It's common for students to turn off to school and adopt an air of indifference, but we make a mistake if we think any student stops caring. Growth-minded teachers. Who are these people? How can growth-minded teachers be so selfless, devoting untold hours to the worst students? Are they just saints? Is it reasonable to expect that everyone can become a saint? The answer is that they're not entirely selfless. They love to learn. And teaching is a wonderful way to learn. About people and how they tick. About what you teach. About yourself. And about life. Fixed-minded teachers often think of themselves as finished products. Their role is simply to impart their knowledge. But doesn't that get boring year after year? Standing before yet another crowd of faces and imparting? Now that's hard. Seymour Saracen was a professor of mine when I was in graduate school.
Recommend
He was a
browser
wonderful
might
educator,
still
and he
support
always
it
told
may
us to
have
question
already
assumptions.
been removed
There's an
from
assumption, he said, that schools are for students learning.
access
Well,
compatibility
why aren't they just as much for teachers learning? I never forgot that. In all of my teaching, I think about what I find fascinating and what I would love to learn more about. I use my teaching to grow, and that makes me, even after all these years, a fresh and eager teacher. One of Marva Collins's first mentors taught her the same thing, that above all, a good teacher is one who continues to learn along with the students. And she lets her students know that right up front. Sometimes I don't like other grown-ups very much because they think they know everything. I don't know everything. I can learn all the time. It's been said that Dorothy DeLay was an extraordinary teacher because she was not interested in teaching. She was interested in learning. So are great teachers born or made? Can anyone be a Collins, Esquith, or DeLay? It starts with the growth mindset about yourself and about children. Not just lip service to the idea that all children can learn, but a deep desire to reach in and ignite the mind of every child. Michael Lewis in the New York Times tells of a coach who did this for him. I had a new taste for extra work, and it didn't take long to figure out how much better my life could be if I applied this new zeal, acquired on a baseball field, to the rest of it. It was as if this baseball coach had reached inside me, found a rusty switch marked "turn on" before attempting to use, and flipped it. Coaches are teachers too, but their students' successes and failures are played out in front of crowds, published in the newspapers, and written into the record books. Their jobs rest on producing winners. Let's look closely at 3 legendary coaches to see their mindsets in action. Coaches, winning through mindset. Everyone who knows me well laughs when I say someone is complicated. What do you think of so-and-so? Oh, he's complicated. It's usually not a compliment. It means that so-and-so may be capable of great charm, warmth, and generosity, but there's an undercurrent of ego that can erupt at any time. You never really know when you can trust him. The fixed mindset makes people complicated. It makes them worried about their fixed traits and creates the need to document them, sometimes at your expense. And it makes them judgmental. The fixed mindset coach in action. Bobby Knight, the famous and controversial college basketball coach, is complicated. He could be unbelievably kind, One time he passed up an important and lucrative opportunity to be a sportscaster because a former player of his had been in a bad accident. Knight rushed to his side and saw him through the ordeal. He could be extremely gracious. After the basketball team he coached won the Olympic gold medal, he insisted that the team pay homage first and foremost to Coach Henry Iba. Iba had never been given proper respect for his Olympic accomplishments, and in whatever way he could, Knight wanted to make up for it. He had the team carry Coach Iba around the floor on their shoulders. Knight cared greatly about his players' academic records. He wanted them to get an education, and he had a firm rule against missing classes or tutoring sessions. But he could also be cruel, and this cruelty came from the fixed mindset. John Feinstein, author of Season on the Brink, a book about Knight and his team, tells us Knight was incapable of accepting failure. Every defeat was personal. His team lost, a team he had selected and coached. Failure on any level all but destroyed him, especially failure in coaching, because it was coaching that gave him his identity, made him special, set him apart. A loss made him a failure, obliterated his identity. So when he was your coach, when your wins and losses measured him, he was mercilessly judgmental. His demeaning of players who let him down was, hopefully, without parallel. In Daryl Thomas, Feinstein says, Knight saw a player of huge potential. Thomas had what coaches call a $1 million body. He was big and strong, but also fast. He could shoot the ball with his left hand or his right hand. Knight couldn't live with the thought that Thomas and his $1 million body weren't bringing the team success. You know what you are, Daryl? You are the worst F pussy I've ever seen play basketball at this school. The absolute worst pussy ever. You have more goddamn ability than 95% of the players we've had here, but you are a pussy from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. An absolute effing pussy. That's my assessment of you after 3 years. To make a similar point, Knight once put a Tampax into a player's locker. Thomas was a sensitive guy. An assistant coach had given this advice. When he's calling you an asshole, don't listen. But when he starts telling you why you're an asshole, listen. That way you'll get better. Thomas couldn't follow that advice. He heard everything. And after the tirade, he broke down right there on the basketball court. The axe of judgment came down on players who had the audacity to lose a game. Often Knight did not let the guilty parties ride back home with the rest of the team. They were no longer worthy of respectful treatment. One time, after his team reached the semifinals of a national tournament, but not the national tournament, he was asked by an interviewer what he liked best about the team. What I like best about this team right now, Knight answered, is the fact that I only have to watch it play one more time. Some players could take it better than others. Steve Alford, who went on to have a professional career, had come to Indiana with clear goals in mind and was able to maintain a strong growth focus much of the time. He was able to hear and use Knight's wisdom and, for the most part, ignore the obscene or demeaning parts of the tirades. But even he describes how the team broke down under the yoke of Knight's judgments, and how he himself became so personally unhappy at some points that he lost his zest for the sport. The atmosphere was poisonous. When I had been playing well, I had always stayed upbeat, no matter how much coach yelled. But now his negativism, piled on top of my own, was drowning me. Mom and Dad were concerned. They could see the love of the game was going out of me. The Holy Grail. No mistakes. Says Alfred, Coach's Holy Grail was the mistake-free game. Uh-oh. We know which mindset makes mistakes intolerable. And tonight's explosions were legendary. There was the time he threw the chair across the court. There was the time he yanked his player off the court by his jersey. There was the time he grabbed his player by the neck. He often tried to justify his behavior by saying he was toughening the team up, preparing them to play under pressure. But the truth is, he couldn't control himself. Was the chair a teaching exercise? Was the chokehold educational? He motivated his players, not through respect for them, but through intimidation, through fear. They feared his judgments and explosions. Did it work? Sometimes it worked. He had 3 championship teams. In the season on the brink, described by John Feinstein, the team did not have size, experience, or quickness, but they were contenders. They won 21 games, thanks to Knight's great basketball knowledge and coaching skills. But other times, it didn't work. Individual players or the team as a whole broke down. In the season on the brink, they collapsed at the end of the season. The year before, too, the team had collapsed under Knight's pressure. Over the years, some players had escaped by transferring to other schools, by breaking rules, like cutting classes or skipping tutoring sessions, or by going early to the pros, like Isaiah Thomas. On a world tour, the players often sat around fantasizing about where they should have gone to school if they hadn't made the mistake of choosing Indiana. It's not that Knight had a fixed mindset about his players' ability. He firmly believed in their capacity to develop. But he had a fixed mindset about himself and his coaching ability. The team was his product, and they had to prove his ability every time out. They were not allowed to lose games, make mistakes, or question him in any way, because that would reflect on his competence. Nor did he seem to analyze his motivational strategies when they weren't working. Maybe Daryl Thomas needed another kind of incentive aside from ridicule or humiliation. What are we to make of this complicated man as a mentor to young players? His biggest star, Isaiah Thomas, expresses his profound ambivalence about Knight. You know, there were times when if I had a gun, I think I would have shot him. And there were other times when I wanted to put my arms around him, hug him,
अरे
tell him I
बकाली की
loved him.
पक्का लक्षण
I would not consider myself an unqualified success if my best student had considered shooting me. The growth mindset coach in action. A coach for all seasons. Coach John Wooden produced one of the greatest championships records in sports. He led the UCLA basketball team to the NCAA championship in 1964, 1965, 1967, 1968, 1969, 1970, 1971, 1972, 1973, and 1975. There were seasons when his team was undefeated, and they once had an 88-game winning streak. All of this I sort of knew. What I didn't know was that when Wooden arrived at UCLA, it was a far cry from a basketball dynasty. In fact, he didn't want to work at UCLA at all. He wanted to go to Minnesota. It was arranged that Minnesota would phone him at 6 o'clock on a certain evening to tell him if he had the job. He told UCLA to call him at 7. No one called at 6, 6:30, or even 6:45. So when UCLA called at 7, he said yes. No sooner had he hung up than the call from Minnesota came. A storm had messed up the phone lines and prevented the 6 o'clock phone call with the job offer from getting through. UCLA had grossly inadequate facilities. For his first 16 years, Wooden held practice in a crowded, dark, and poorly ventilated gym, known as the BO barn because of the atmospheric effect of the sweating bodies. In the same gym, there were often wrestling matches, gymnastics training, trampoline jumping, and cheerleading workouts going on alongside basketball practice. There was also no place for the games. For the first few years, they had to use the BO barn, and then for 14 more years, they had to travel around the region borrowing gyms from schools and towns. Then there were the players. When he put them through their first practice, he was shattered. They were so bad that if he'd had an honorable way to back out of the job, he would have. The press had perceptibly picked his team to finish last in their division. But Wooden went to work, and this laughable team did not finish last. It won the division title, with 22 wins and 7 losses for the season. The next year, they went to the NCAA playoffs. What did he give them? He gave them constant training in the basic skills. He gave them conditioning, and he gave them mindset. The Holy Grail: full preparation and full effort. Wooden is not complicated. He's wise and interesting, but not complicated. He's just a straight-ahead growth mindset guy who lives by this rule. You have to apply yourself each day to become a little better. By applying yourself to the task of becoming a little better each and every day over a period of time, you will become a lot better. He didn't ask for mistake-free games. He didn't demand that his players never lose. He asked for full preparation and full effort from them. Did I win? Did I lose? Those are the wrong questions. The correct question is, did I make my best effort? If so, he says, you may be outscored, but you will never lose. He was not a softie. He did not tolerate coasting. If the players were coasting during practice, he turned out the lights and left. Gentlemen, practice is over. They had lost their opportunity to become better that day. Equal treatment. Like delay, Wooden gave equal time and attention to all of his players, regardless of their initial skills. They, in turn, gave all and blossomed. Here is Wooden talking about 2 new players when they arrived at UCLA. I looked at each one to see what he had and then said to myself, oh gracious, if he can make a real contribution, a playing contribution, to our team, then we must be pretty lousy. However, what I couldn't see was what these men had inside. Both gave just about everything they could possibly give, and both became starters. One is the starting center on a national championship team. He respected all players equally. You know how some players' numbers are retired after they move on, in homage to their greatness? No player's number was retired while Wooden was coach, although he had some of the greatest players of all time, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton. Later on, when their numbers were retired, he was against it. Other fellows who played on our team also wore those numbers. Some of those players gave me close to everything they had. The jersey and the number on it never belonged to just one single player, no matter how great or how big a star that particular player is. It goes against the whole concept of what a team is. Wait a minute. He was in the business of winning games. Don't you have to go with your talented players and give less to the second stringers? Well, he didn't play all players equally, but he gave to all players equally. For example, when he recruited another player the same year as Bill Walton, he told him that he would play very little in actual games because of Walton. But he promised him, by the time you graduate, you'll get a pro contract. You'll be that good. By his 3rd year, the player was giving Bill Walton all he could handle in practice, and when he turned pro, he was named Rookie of the Year in his league. Preparing players for life. Was Wooden a genius? A magician able to turn mediocre players into champions? Actually, he admits that in terms of basketball tactics and strategies, he was quite average. What he was really good at was analyzing and motivating his players. With these skills, he was able to help his players fulfill their potential, not just in basketball, but in life, something he found even more rewarding than winning games. Did Wooden's methods work? Aside from the 10 championship titles, we have the testimony of his players, none of whom refer to firearms. Bill Walton, Hall of Famer. Of course, the real competition he was preparing us for was life. He taught us the values and characteristics that could make us not only good players, but also good people. Denny Crum, successful coach. I can't imagine what my life would have been had Coach Wooden not been my guiding light. As the years pass, I appreciate him more and can only pray that I can have half as much influence on the young people I coach as he has had on me. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Hall of Famer. The wisdom of Coach Wooden had a profound influence on me as an athlete, but an even greater influence on me as a human being. He is responsible, in part, for the person I am today. Listen to this story. It was the moment of victory. UCLA had just won its first national championship. But Coach Wooden was worried about Fred Slaughter, a player who had started every game and had had a brilliant year up until this final championship game. The game had not been going well, and as it got worse and worse, Wooden felt a change had to be made. So he pulled Fred. The replacement player did a great job, and Wooden left him in until the game was virtually won. The victory was a peak moment. Not only had they just won their first NCAA title by beating Duke, but they had ended the season with 30 wins and 0 losses. Yet Wooden's concern for Fred dampened his euphoria. As Wooden left the press conference and went to find Fred, he opened the door to the dressing room. Fred was waiting for him. "Coach, I want you to know I understand. You had to leave Doug in there because he played so well, and I didn't. I wanted to play in the worst way, but I do understand. And if anyone says I was upset, it's not true. Disappointed, yes, But upset? No. And I was very happy for Doug. There are coaches out there, Wooden says, who have won championships with the dictator approach. Among them, Vince Lombardi and Bobby Knight. I had a different philosophy. For me, concern, compassion, and consideration were always priorities of the highest order. Read the story of Fred Slaughter again, and you tell me whether, under the same circumstances, Coach Knight would have rushed to console Daryl Thomas. And would Knight have allowed Thomas to reach down to find his pride, dignity, and generosity in his moment of disappointment? Which is the enemy, success or failure? Pat Summitt is the coach of the Tennessee women's basketball team, the Lady Vols. She has coached them to 6 national championships. She didn't come into the game with Wooden's philosophical attitude, but was at first more Knight-like in her stance. Every time the team lost, she couldn't let go of it. She continued to live it, beating it to death and torturing herself and the team with it. Then she graduated to a love-hate relationship with losing. Emotionally, it still makes her feel sick. But she loves what she does. It forces everyone, players and coaches, to develop a more complete game. It is success that has become the enemy. Wooden calls it being infected with success. Pat Riley, former coach of the championship Los Angeles Lakers team, calls it the disease of me, thinking you are the success, and chucking the discipline and the work that got you there. Summitt explains, success lulls you. It makes the most ambitious of us complacent and sloppy. As Summitt spoke, Tennessee had won 5 NCAA championships, but only once when they were favored to win. On every other occasion, we were upset. We lost as many as 4 or 5 titles that we were predicted to win. After the 1996 championship, the team was complacent. The older players were the national champions, and the new players expected to be swept to victory merely by being at Tennessee. It was a disaster. They began to lose and lose badly. On December 15th, they were crushed by Stanford on their own home court. A few games later, they were crushed again. Now they had 5 losses and everyone had given up on them. The North Carolina coach, meaning to comfort Summitt, told her, well, just hang in there till next year. HBO had come to Tennessee to film a documentary, but now the producers were looking for another team. Even her assistants were thinking they wouldn't make it into the March championship playoffs. So before the next game, Summitt met with the team for 5 hours. That night, they played Old Dominion, the second-ranked team in the country. For the first time that season, they gave all. But they lost again. It was devastating. They had invested, gone for it, and still lost. Some were sobbing so hard they couldn't speak or even breathe. Get your heads up, Summitt told them. If you give effort like this all the time, if you fight like this, I'm telling you, I promise you, we'll be there in March. 2 months later, they were the national champions. Conclusion? Beware of success. It can knock you into a fixed mindset. I won because I have talent, therefore I will keep winning. Success can infect a team or it can infect an individual. Alex Rodriguez, one of the best players in baseball, is not infected with success. You never stay the same, he says. You either go one way or the other. Our legacy. As parents, teachers, and coaches, we are entrusted with people's lives. They are our responsibility and our legacy. We know now that the growth mindset has a key role to play in helping us fulfill our mission and in helping them fulfill their potential. Grow your mindset. Every word and action from parent to child sends a message. Tomorrow, listen to what you say to your kids and tune in to the messages you're sending. Are they messages that say, you have permanent traits and I'm judging them? Or are they messages that say, you're a developing person and I'm interested in your development? How do you use praise? Remember that praising children's intelligence or talent, tempting as it is, sends a fixed mindset message. It makes their confidence and motivation more fragile. Instead, try to focus on the processes they used, their strategies, effort, or choices. Practice working the process praise into your interactions with your children. Watch and listen to yourself carefully when your child messes up. Remember that constructive criticism is feedback that helps the child understand how to fix something. It's not feedback that labels or simply excuses the child. At the end of each day, write down the constructive criticism and the process praise you've given your kids. Parents often set goals their children can work toward. Remember that having an innate talent is not a goal. Expanding skills and knowledge is. Pay careful attention to the goals you've set for your children. If you're a teacher, remember that lowering standards doesn't raise student self-esteem. But neither does raising standards without giving students ways of reaching them. The growth mindset gives you a way to set high standards and have students reach them. Try presenting topics in a growth framework and giving students process feedback. I think you'll like what happens. Do you think of your slower students as kids who will never be able to learn well? Do they think of themselves as permanently dumb? Instead, try to figure out what they don't understand and what learning strategies they don't have. Remember that great teachers believe in the growth of talent and intellect and are fascinated by the process of learning. Are you a fixed mindset coach? Do you think first and foremost about your record and your reputation? Are you intolerant of mistakes? Do you try to motivate your players through judgment? That may be what's holding up your athletes. Try on the growth mindset. Instead of asking for mistake-free games, ask for full commitment and full effort. Instead of judging the players, give them the respect and the coaching they need to develop. As parents, teachers, and coaches, our mission is developing people's potential. Let's use all the lessons of the growth mindset and whatever else we can to do this. Chapter 8, Changing Mindsets, a workshop. The growth mindset is based on the belief in change, and the most gratifying part of my work is watching people change. Nothing is better than seeing people find their way to the things they value. This chapter is about kids and adults who found their way to using their abilities, and about how all of us can do that. The nature of change. I was in the middle of first grade when my family moved. Suddenly, I was in a new school. Everything was unfamiliar. The teacher, the students, and the work. The work was what terrified me. The new class was way ahead of my old one, or at least they seemed that way to me. They were writing letters I hadn't learned to write yet. And there was a way to do everything that everyone seemed to know except me. So when the teacher said, "Class, put your name on your paper in the right place," I had no idea what she meant. So I cried. Each day things came up that I didn't know how to do. Each time I felt lost and overwhelmed. Why didn't I just say to the teacher, "Mrs. Khan, I haven't learned this yet. Could you show me how?" Another time, when I was little, my parents gave me money to go to the movies with an adult and a group of kids. As I rounded the corner to the meeting place, I looked down the block and saw them all leaving. But instead of running after them and yelling, "Wait for me!" I stood frozen, clutching the coins in my hand and watching them recede into the distance. Why didn't I try to stop them or catch up with them? Why did I accept defeat before I had tried some simple tactics? I know that in my dreams I had often performed magical or superhuman feats in the face of danger. I even have a picture of myself in my self-made Superman cape. Why in real life couldn't I do an ordinary thing like ask for help or call out for people to wait? In my work I see lots of young children like this. Bright, seemingly resourceful children who are paralyzed by setbacks. In some of our studies, they just have to take the simplest action to make things better, but they don't. These are the young children with the fixed mindset. When things go wrong, they feel powerless and incapable. Even now, when something goes wrong or when something promising seems to be slipping away, I still have a passing feeling of powerlessness. Does that mean I haven't changed? No, it means that change isn't like surgery. Even when you change, the old beliefs aren't just removed like a worn-out hip or knee and replaced with better ones. Instead, the new beliefs take their place alongside the old ones. And as they become stronger, they give you a different way to think, feel, and act. Beliefs are the key to happiness and to misery. In the 1960s, psychiatrist Aaron Beck was working with his clients when he suddenly realized it was their beliefs that were causing their problems. Just before they felt a wave of anxiety or depression, something quickly flashed through their minds. It could be, Dr. Beck, I think I'm incompetent, or this therapy will never work. I'll never feel better. These kinds of beliefs caused their negative feelings not only in the therapy session, but in their lives too. They weren't beliefs people were usually conscious of. Yet Beck found he could teach people to pay attention and hear them, and then he discovered he could teach them how to work with and change these beliefs. This is how cognitive therapy was born, one of the most effective therapies ever developed. Whether they're aware of it or not, all people keep a running account of what's happening to them, what it means, and what they should do. In other words, our minds are constantly monitoring and interpreting. That's just how we stay on track. But sometimes the interpretation process goes awry. Some people put more extreme interpretations on things that happen, and they react with exaggerated feelings of anxiety, depression, or anger, or superiority. Mindsets go further. Mindsets frame the running account that's taking place in people's heads. They guide the whole interpretation process. The fixed mindset creates an internal monologue that is focused on judging. This means I'm a loser. This means I'm a better person than they are. This means I'm a bad husband. This means my partner is selfish. In several studies, we probed the way people with a fixed mindset dealt with information they were receiving. We found that they put a very strong evaluation on each and every piece of information. Something good led to a very strong positive label, and something bad led to a very strong negative label. People with a growth mindset are also constantly monitoring what's going on, but their internal monologue is not about judging themselves and others in this way. Certainly they're sensitive to positive and negative information, but they're attuned to its implications for learning and constructive action. What can I learn from this? How can I improve? How can I help my partner to do this better? Now, cognitive therapy basically teaches people to rein in their extreme judgments and make them more reasonable. For example, suppose Alana does poorly on a test and draws the conclusion, I'm stupid. Cognitive therapy would teach her to look more closely at the facts by asking, what is the evidence for and against your conclusion? Alana may, after prodding, come up with a long list of ways in which she has been competent in the past, and may then confess, I guess I'm not as incompetent as I thought. She may also be encouraged to think of reasons she did poorly on the test other than stupidity, and these may further temper her negative judgment. Alana is then taught how to do this for herself, so that when she judges herself negatively in the future, she can refute the judgment and feel better. In this way, cognitive therapy helps people make more realistic and optimistic judgments, but it does not take them out of the fixed mindset and its world of judgment. It does not confront the basic assumption, the idea that traits are fixed, that is causing them to constantly measure themselves. In other words, it does not escort them out of the framework of judgment and into the framework of growth. This chapter is about changing the internal monologue from a judging one to a growth-oriented one. The Mindset Lectures. Just learning about the growth mindset can cause a big shift in the way people think about themselves and their lives. So each year in my undergraduate course, I teach about these mindsets, not only because they are part of the topic of the course, but also because I know what pressure these students are under. Every year, students describe to me how these ideas have changed them in all areas of their lives. Here is Maggie, the aspiring writer. I recognized that when it comes to artistic or creative endeavors, I had internalized a fixed mindset. I believed that people were inherently artistic or creative, and that you could not improve through effort. This directly affected my life because I have always wanted to be a writer, but have been afraid to pursue any writing classes or to share my creative writing with others. This is directly related to my mindset because any negative criticism would mean that I am not a writer inherently. I was too scared to expose myself to the possibility that I might not be a natural. Now, after listening to your lectures, I've decided to register for a creative writing class next term, and I feel that I have really come to understand what was preventing me from pursuing an interest that has long been my secret dream. I really feel this information has empowered me. Maggie's internal monologue used to say, don't do it, don't take a writing class, don't share your writing with others, it's not worth the risk. Your dream could be destroyed. Protect it. Now it says, go for it, make it happen, develop your skills, pursue your dream. And here's Jason, the athlete. As a student athlete at Columbia, I had exclusively the fixed mindset. Winning was everything, and learning did not enter the picture. However, after listening to your lectures, I realized that this is not a good mindset. I've been working on learning while I compete, under the realization that if I can continually improve, even in matches, I will become a much better athlete. Jason's internal monologue used to be win-win. You have to win. Prove yourself. Everything depends on it. Now it's observe, learn, improve, become a better athlete. And finally, here's Tony, the recovering genius. In high school, I was able to get top grades with minimal studying and sleeping. I came to believe that it would always be